So I'm Maike Gericke. I'm the co-founder of Tiramisu, where I'm spending most of my time rethinking technology use and social networks from the perspective of a bit more kindness, purpose, and well-being. And that's exactly why I'm extremely happy to have the two speakers here with me today, Dr. Julie Fratantoni and Emma Lemke. Julie is a cognitive neuroscientist, is also the head of operations of the Brain Health Project, which is a longitudinal 10-year research study that is really looking at assessing brain health and improving it through different measures, through different coaching and learning techniques. And next to that, she is really also focused on advancing conversations and education around mental health, and is doing this through a couple of social channels and her own podcast as well. And Emma is the co-founder and CEO of the Log Off movement, which she started as a high school senior with 3 friends. She launched Log Off basically with this perspective of rethinking social media by teens, for teens. And it is really a global movement. It has 70 teams from 16 countries included in it, and is all about bringing more youth voices into mental health discussion. And she spreads digital awareness and consciousness through the Log Off with podcast content, digital challenges, well-being initiatives, and more. So I'm really, really happy that you are both here with me today. And I want to basically start with the first question to you, Emma, that I'm really curious about, which is what made you start the Log Off movement, and what was your starting point, and what was your motivation to start that?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. This is such a fun panel and such an important discussion. But how I started, like you said, I created Log Off in I think it was the summer going into my senior year in high school, but the idea for it had really been festering in my brain for about 3 years prior. It all started when in 7th grade, I got my iPhone, or at that point, I think it was like an iPod Touch. I instantly got Instagram, Twitter, a Gmail account. And at that age in my childhood, I really was susceptible to just becoming addicted on it. And as someone who has struggled with an anxiety disorder and OCD, those apps really triggered what I already was struggling with. So I was spending about 5 hours a day on these apps for 2 or 3 years. And that became so mentally taxing. Yet I felt as though I couldn't escape this weird parasitic relationship with social media, because as a society, a lot of teens, and I was one of them, felt pressure to be on these apps. So in 9th grade, I finally asked, myself, why am I responding this way to all of my digital notifications? I'm someone who really values control. Why am I allowing notifications to just suck me in? And then from that day forth in 9th grade, I started researching, and I was utterly shocked and kind of disgusted by just the amount of data out there that proved that social media was negatively impacting my mental health, and that it was a space where people could really be harmed, specifically teens, without understanding that they were being harmed. So from that point forth, I'm kind of the person where I saw that data, I saw the information, and I couldn't really turn back. So I started in my head creating this youth community. And eventually during COVID, I had the time to create it, and it has just blossomed into a wonderful youth experience that I'm really happy to be a part of. So that's kind of how I got to Log Off.
That's such an inspiring story, and thank you for sharing this. Julie, the same question, a little bit of a similar question to you. What made you start in neuroscience, and what makes you excited about brain health in general?
Sure. Well, I think I was fortunate to have an incredible opportunity when I was doing my clinical fellowship to get introduced to the world of cognitive training and the fact that there is unlimited potential for our brain. And so I think there's the majority of research and a lot of work around the brain waits until there's disease or injury to really address it, as opposed to being proactive. And so that was really exciting to me, and getting to work with a lot of different populations, whether that was, high performing corporate executives to individuals with a brain injury, and everything in between, that there are things that you can be doing every day to make your brain healthier and stronger and more resilient. And largely, most people don't know these things. And it's stuff that, we've made big advances in the field of neuroscience in the last just even 10, 20 years. This information isn't quite trickling down fast enough. And Emma, to your point, there's a lot of things we're having to swim upstream, so to speak, in terms of just fighting against a lot of just cultural norms that are not helping. So yeah, that made me just excited as I got my PhD and was learning more about how the brain works and understanding that and how we can use that scientific information to our benefit to help us. When you understand how your brain works, then you know how to use it better and you know how to set yourself up for success ultimately, so that you can, it's not just about being healthy, but being healthy allows you to then do the things that you want to do and reach your goals and be there for people that you want to be there for. So I think, so yeah, so that was kind of a little bit of just my opening up my eyes into this world of potential, and that there's a lot that we can do, and really encouraging, as opposed to, I think there is still so much stigma and fear around the brain, and really thinking that there's nothing I can do, or it's just like, I'm just going to get older and experience decline, or, and so really, or just, a lot of the medications or treatments that are available are just sort of treating symptoms, but never actually getting at the root cause. So I think really my heart is to equip people with just knowing what they can do today, and not having to wait until there's actually an issue. So becoming involved with being at the Center for Brain Health and having that really be a lot of our heartbeat behind everything we're doing. And then now getting to lead the Brain Health Project, which is so exciting. And it's all about just creating an online platform where people can access this type of information from anywhere. So that's sort of a summary of how I got to be where I am.
So when people talk about brain health or the health of brains in general, the term that we use most of the time is mental health, right? And I think, and that's also something that I learned from you a little bit, Julie. Basically, you very often you're very close to just always using this term brain health. Can you explain a little bit what the difference is and how we can actually measure and improve brain health and the health of our brain?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say brain health is this big umbrella, and mental health fits within that. Mental health is really focused on just this component of emotional well-being, and but brain health encompasses everything from your cognitive functions like attention and memory, but then also higher level things like problem solving, decision making, organization. And then things like your daily life, your responsibilities, your sense of purpose, sleep, diet, exercise. And then, of course, well-being is more than just mood. It's actual resilience and life satisfaction and quality of life. And then social interactions are a big piece of that too. So experiencing compassion, having social support, social engagement. These are all things that your brain is responsible for. And then, of course, things like sleep and stress, your actual neural system. So brain health is all of that. It's at the heart, the center of everything that we do. And I would say mental health is just that narrow slice of well-being. And so there's, I think, getting people to expand when you think about the brain, people just immediately go to mental health, depression, anxiety, things like that, Alzheimer's, dementia, things to do with aging. And really it's like, no, we're using our brains every single day for every single thing. And so we need to be thinking about it that way and understanding that our lifestyle and our habits are going to impact and influence that it's a two-way street because of things like epigenetics, things like neuroplasticity, that we are ultimately building. We say this all the time, you are the architect of your own brain. And so the brain you have today is a brain that you've built. And Emma, to your point, in those critical years of development, in your teenage years, and actually your frontal lobe isn't fully finished developing until around age 25. So you still have still have more development to go. And so that's a really critical period of knowing that everything, and even after 25, still that everything we're doing is going to shape the brain that we have based on how we use it every day.
Yeah, I think Emma, from your perspective, you have been, or the work that Logoff does is basically focusing on a lot of the factors that Julie was just hinting at when it comes to brain health, from well-being, but also from really social interaction, from taking brain breaks and things like that. Can you tell us a little bit more from your practical experience and insight of going through that, especially with teams and building these kind of challenges and initiatives? Can you tell us a little bit more about what you realize are the most important factors and what your main recommendations would be from that perspective?
Absolutely. And I completely agree. I think that one thing that I found with log off is what you said. A lot of teens need that social break. A lot of teens and kids around me need those interactions to understand what works and what doesn't work. When you're in your childhood, I know I needed a lot of the failed interactions. I needed to know social cues. I needed to learn how to pick up conversations. And when you can instantly flock to your phone or social media as a means to connect, then you're not really gaining that. And I think that that's one major thing that we discuss in Log Off is rerouting this sense of connectivity. Because I think in our society and in our culture, a lot of times Gen Z, we're fed this idea that you can connect the most when you're on your phone. Like there are billions and billions of possible connections and followers out there. Go in there and you'll find a ton of people. And sure, I've met maybe 5 people that I haven't met on my like via social media. But in general, I think that it is such a false narrative to put out there that you can connect more when you're using a screen rather than just connecting with the people around you. Because oftentimes, when there is that chance for real connection face to face, we always, or at least my generation, kind of flocks to their screens because it's just this natural societal pressure to connect via that. So I think that that's one thing that I've really noticed is that we need to reroute the term connectivity and we need to prioritize human connection. And that's one thing again with log off that I found. Another thing that I really, really bark at my family and friends and to the people around me is just spreading general digital consciousness. Because I think that one thing I have found is you enter these apps and you enter screens and technology with a very kind of embryonic sense of what the apps are doing for you. So I think that for me, like I entered Instagram as a 13-year-old, not understanding the attention economy, not understanding that I was constantly being advertised and tracked. I just thought, oh, I'll find connections. Like I don't want FOMO. I want to be able to post things. And after I started log off, I've learned so much that is just one really frightening about how much I'm being tracked and how much time is constantly being sucked into these apps, and also just the fight for my attention. And I think that understanding how these apps are created, understanding and really developing your digital consciousness then creates more of a mutualistic relationship with devices, because after I had a more well-rounded sense of what these apps were doing for me and like how they were neuromarketing towards me, I was able to take more control back and have more agency over my time and giving that up. So those would be the two major things that I found through my time with Log Off. And specifically, you know, we really pride ourselves on pushing for digital consciousness, especially across our generation. And that's been our founding statement since the beginning.
Yeah, I think the factor of consciousness is one of the most important aspects of really starting to make a change. And I think the other factor is then basically this topic of building habits and staying with them. I think in the last year especially, but I think for a longer time, but in the last year especially, we've all had our own struggles with maintaining those habits and basically kind of really getting to take care of our brain and of our health in this kind of ever-changing environment. I was sometimes making jokes myself that I was spending so much time building solutions for social connection that I was entirely not thinking about reaching out to my friends, or basically this topic of there is so much time that we're spending digitally that we just forget about taking breaks, because everything happens in those devices that we're talking about is not really the best way to spend our time. What do you have any examples? And they open this, so whoever wants to answer first can answer. But what were your points where you really found I have been tripping up a little bit on my habits in the last year? What are your key points where you said this is not going to work, and then how did you get out of that?
Well, I also just want to respond a little bit to something that Emma was saying in terms of attention economy. And this is something that we incorporate into our training as part of the project, but and we talk a lot about because it is such a big deal. And our attention is truly one of our most precious resources, and it's limited, and we can only really focus on one thing at a time. And so that's a big myth that I'd like to just debunk, is that multitasking is really toxic for your brain. And when we're constantly on the phone while we're driving or texting and trying to listen to a Zoom call, or it's like you can't do both well, and so it takes you longer to do it, and you make more mistakes. So part of that, really retraining your brain of how to focus, and focus is not just about choosing, selecting the thing that I want to pay attention to. It's actually about blocking out everything else that's irrelevant. So it's like a muscle. You can strengthen it, but it takes work. And so how we talked about, the brain we have is a brain we've built. So when you've sort of built in this, every few seconds I check my phone, or every few seconds something interrupts me and I can't think deeply, then when you have moments where it is actually quiet, then you're internally, even though your phone didn't go off, you go to check it, or you're like, there was no email notification, but you're like, oh, let me refresh it. And it's like, it's addicting. You get a little dopamine burst every time you see a new notification pop up. So I think just to put out there that there are specific strategies that we teach, and one of them being, focus on one thing at a time, which is really hard for people. So we say start small, and it's like set 5 or 10 minute alarm. There's also some cool apps that are out there to help you focus. Like there's one where I don't know if you've seen the one, I'm blanking on the name of it right now, but it's like a tree starts growing, you like grow a little forest, and then if you use your phone, it dies. So that one's pretty motivating. But yeah, timers are effective and simple, and then in terms of taking breaks. But I will say, so to your question about, where has this been hard? I think it has been hard being, working remotely, working from home, having everything be on Zoom, and even just simply the fact that I can have multiple screens up at once. So it's like you can have your Zoom meeting, you can also have your email up, you can also have these 50 other windows on your desktop, and that's distracting. So as much as possible, it's like minimize screens, close tabs. I try to just have this be the full screen version, but it's it's really tempting to be like, anyway, so just closing out of things. But I would say I developed probably I would say I backslided a little bit versus being in person in the office with that, because the temptation was just like, you're just already on your computer all the time. So it made it easier in ways to multitask, but was not helpful.
And I would completely echo that too. I think COVID created this environment where for everyone, it was incredibly difficult to avoid screens. And I think that one thing that I distinctly found was difficult was my senior year being online, in the sense that I was applying for colleges, and I would consistently check my Outlook or my emails, and I would just refresh. And again, it's that same desire to find the dopamine hit. I think that was one thing that really, really, I really struggled with. And again, I backslided too. Another thing was going on YouTube and clicking recommended videos. I always say to people in log off, fight against the recommended, fight against the algorithm. But sometimes I would just click a video and I would think to myself, like, oh, you clicked a recommended video. What are you doing? And I think that I would beat myself up occasionally about doing things like that. But what I've learned, that having the community of log off, and just having someone like my friend who created it with me, having a companion in the fight to have better screen time, was incredibly imperative to building healthier habits. Because I found that if I could go to her and say, Hannah, I just spent 2 hours scrolling through like Instagram. What am I doing? I'm working at I work with log off. I shouldn't be doing this. Having that person and that resource to say, you're human. It's okay. One, it's extremely encouraging, and two, it allows me to kind of have a constant check and sounding board and finding healthier habits and boundaries. So I think that that's one thing that I struggled with, but having the community of log off and a friend there was extremely helpful to really getting healthier habits, and even when I failed, maintaining a route to continue to develop them.
Yeah, I think to your point, Emma, I think that's one thing. The accountability is something that is extremely important. But I think Lennis made also a really good point in the chat, which is about self-compassion, which I also wanted to make. I think a really important part is also then just letting it go sometimes, because we are all not perfect, especially in this world that the tools are really not set up for us to do those things that we want, but are set up for us to do those things that we are just continuously built to put more attention and to get another recommended videos. At some point, I think it's also about recognizing this point of, okay, it's not really my fault. I can only do so much, and then maybe moving on from there and just trying to improve. I think that's one really important aspect as well, which also brings me to my next question. And I think that's a quite interesting one, because we are all three of us actually are quite very much in the space of using technology in order to bring forward this message of more mental health and better health, better brain health, better practices. You, Emma, especially are quite harsh on technology and especially social media solutions yourself. But at the same time, you kind of have to, and especially in the last year, that's the way to reach people. That's how you can interact on a global level. How do you deal with that discrepancy? How do you make that work?
Yeah, that's definitely, a lot of times I've caught myself saying, is this hypocritical? Are we're on Instagram, we're using technology constantly to push the message, but I think it's important to echo that, social media is not a black and white issue, especially in our movement. We see it as just this multifaceted entity. It contains a lot of bad, it can harm your mental health, but when used correctly, it can really be a youth tool for self-expression. I know a ton of people who put their art on Instagram, and they use TikTok to work on video editing and stuff like that. I really applaud. But I think it can be extremely difficult to get to a place where your relationship with social media and technology isn't parasitic, but it's mutualistic, and you're using it with your full agency. So I think that what I have found that's really helped the log off community, and that's helped me personally, is just how do I put in safeguards, and how do I put in these boundaries that even when I veer off the path, it will bounce me back and I can kind of continue forward and create healthy habits. So the app like Moment, which I think now it's kind of dissolving, but it's basically what Apple does, where you can put in screen time limits. Having something like that has really helped me. I also think that, again, having that communal piece of, if I want to talk about this and use technology, how can I engage with people in a more, I guess, humane way? A lot of people in the log off community will hop on a Zoom call. With my friends, I always opt to connect with them virtually in kind of, I see it as more humane means. So I'll FaceTime them. I'll jump on a Zoom. We'll play board games online. And that was specifically during COVID. But I think that creating habits like that, where you don't instantly turn to social media as the main means of connecting, but also being able to use it and saying to yourself, I can use it, but in these parameters, like I'll use it only for 30 minutes. And when I scroll, I'll sit in a room alone. I don't want to scroll around family. Putting in things like that can really help to taking that relationship to the next step, where you have control and you have your agency back. And that's really been helpful for me and a lot of members of the community.
Julie, what's your perspective, also from the same perspective of using technology and then at the same time yeah, and maybe also from your perspective also, what are the things, how can we actually improve technology solutions, because that's what you're also doing with the Brain Health Project.
Yeah, I think like everything, technology is a tool, right? You can use the tool in good or bad ways. Um, I do think it is interesting. It's like no one is immune to it. So whether you're, a work at the Center for Brain Health or log off movement, or, it's like you can know all the things and you can still fall for the traps because they're the way some of these things are designed to capture your attention and keep it. So I think, giving yourself grace and knowing that, but truly setting up guardrails. And I think this idea of really being proactive rather than reactive. So just kind of like having those set times, I think is huge for me. I know, and a big one for me that's been helpful, like I just turn off push notifications. Like I don't get any, like, it's like, I want to choose, and same with email for work, like having those boundaries of just like, outside of these hours, I'm not going to check it, or, unless I know there's something that I'm looking for that needs to come through. But so yeah, I think those are just some like personal reflections. But in terms of how we can improve technology or the ways we can use it, I mean, that's how you reach everybody. So it's also like, and so I think to be an example of doing it well, or of like, I am going to have a presence, or I am going to use this platform, but I'm going to do it in a way that doesn't have me addicted and on here constantly. And, it's okay. Like, and I think it's tough because the algorithms continuously evolve, so that it's just like this hamster wheel. Like you have to continuous output, continuously keeping up or changing up, or use the new feature, or do this so that you don't get left behind, or so that people actually see your content. And so I think there's just a balance there of like, doing what you can, and then and kind of being okay. And I think for me, it's like, it's not about, and it's kind of a double-edged thing, right? Because if you're growing a platform, growing a business, doing a project where we need, we're trying to recruit 120,000 people over 10 years for the study, because we want really good data to understand and define a healthy brain. So you have to get the word out somehow. But I think also knowing, like, even I think just to the mentality of like one day at a time, and really like, it's like, if I help one person ever, only one person, that's still helping one person, and that's huge. So like, I think we get caught up in numbers and likes and followers, and it's just like, I think zooming back out to realize like, what is real, what is impactful, and like, what are my goals actually? And is my goal to get a bunch of likes on this, or is my goal to like share information and be a resource for people? So I think just kind of that check too of like, why am I using this tool, and what is it helping me accomplish? And if it's not, or if it's causing me, if I'm not getting enough sleep, or I'm not present, or I'm distracted when I'm with people that I love, like, then looking at that. So there's never like, oh, I do it at this time on these days. And you know what I mean? It's just like, it's kind of this ebb and flow of life, which is what makes it hard, because you have to just constantly be adjusting and aware.
Emma, do you have anything to add, or your perspectives on building better technology solutions? What would your ideal solutions look like?
Well, I completely agree with everything you said. I think building those healthier habits, I in the future, I'd love to see more regulation, because I absolutely agree in the sense of everyone is susceptible. Like, you can't get a vaccine to like not go on Instagram, and like it's definitely really difficult because it is evolving. And when you do create healthier habits, TikTok might come out with something that reroutes you and forces you to change. And I think that, again, exactly what we've been saying is just, find your habits and continuously be proactive, continuously be adaptable, and know that it's okay to shift and to create new ones. But I think going into the future, what I would love to see is just, not an Instagram for kids, but having apps like Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and Facebook being just much more of a place for resources and for people to connect in kind of more direct ways. I agree. I think Instagram has really been saturated with likes and with comments, and it's become this place where you can quantify your value in a really corrosive way. And I would love for that to instead become just a place for connection. If social media truly is a means to connect with others, then why is there so much pressure that's just put on getting more likes and comments and followers and all of these kind of meaningless means of value? So I think rerouting social media to kind of go back and harken back to its original purpose is just going to be really imperative. And I completely agree too, where when I post on Log Off and when I started it, I just thought to myself, if one person can come to us and just say, maybe I should look at my screen time more. If one person at least has that thought, then that's a seed that's being planted. And even if it doesn't blossom right now, down the line, they might become more aware of their digital usage and they might become more conscious. So having that mentality going into apps is really important. But again, I think conversations like this is so important because those conversations about digital well-being are really stigmatized, specifically in my generation. So working to have more conversations to destigmatize digital well-being and putting in those boundaries is the first thing that really needs to happen in order to create those environments in social media that are not as based in likes and followers and comments.
I love that perspective, and I think it's also a lot about going back to the actual meaning of the word social network and connection, because in the end we have kind of shifted those terms a little bit on focusing too much on a lot of likes and a lot of interactions, when maybe the one-on-one interaction is actually the most important thing that we are looking for, and is actually the thing that's really helping us also to stay grounded and healthy. We have in our audience, we have in our Q&A, and please feel free to add some more questions if you have any. We have actually 2 questions around overworking and around multitasking. And I think they are from a work perspective, but I think they could be just as well applied to a learning and studying perspective as well. So the first question is from Anjali. It's about, how do you know where you need to draw a line in terms of overburdening yourself with work? I tend to take on too many projects and end up having to deal with burnouts, but I also enjoy working a lot, so there's that too. I think we all know this problem. Julie, Emma, do you want to give some advice to Anjali?
Yeah, we've done burnout, something we're really interested in, and I think just to define burnout, because I think sometimes we use that synonymously with just like stressed or overworked, but true burnout is like point of no return. Like there's cynicism, you've lost trust, you just like, you don't care anymore. I think what's more common is probably just this like overworked culture. And for that, I mean, yes, it's like, we each sort of have a different capacity to know where we're functioning optimally. And so it's like working too little, right, isn't good, and then too much is not good either. So finding that balance. So yeah, so drawing the line is individual. But I think it's like, if you're sacrificing sleep, like if you're not getting 7 to 8 hours every night, if you don't have time to like cook and eat dinner with other people, or have time with friends, I think those are big indications. And then just like your own mental health, like your stress and anxiety levels, depression, things like that, like just knowing your own kind of emotional gauges. So I think there's a lot of different ways to sort of check in with yourself to know, like you have to know what your optimal is. But I think a lot of the kind of attention strategies that we talk about, we call it strategic attention, is really being able to look at your day and assess, what are my top priorities that are going to push me forward, and making sure that you give those 100%, and then having that balance of the things that are not, as important, and being able to give yourself a little bit of a break there. So I think it's just identifying the key things that need that maximal effort versus those that don't. And so just taking a little bit of strategic approach to that, and to which things you say yes to. Because I think, it's great that you enjoy working, but just making sure, like, working for the sake of working isn't the same as choosing those projects that are really aligned with reaching your goals or getting to that next, whatever it is for you.
So David has a question that I think you partially answered already, and we also discussed quite a bit already in terms of attention span, multitasking. But he is basically saying, working as an airline pilot, I'm forced to deal with multitasking activities. How do you suggest to get rid of this professional attitude in daily off-the-job life? So when we are not working, do you have any?
I hear this a lot from airline pilots actually about the multitasking. So it's not technically multitasking if it's, for example, when you're flying the plane, you have, these gauges and these buttons and these screens, but it's all for a single goal of keeping the plane in the air or getting to your destination. So I wouldn't consider that. I would say multitasking on top of that would be listening to a podcast while doing that, or like having a YouTube video up, or even so. I think there's a bit of a distinction there, like walking and chewing gum, not so much multitasking, but driving and talking on the phone, yes. So it's like two different goals. And so really what's happening there is your brain is switching rapidly back and forth between those networks, which causes errors and stress. And so I think fighting that attitude, though, I mean, that's something that people put on their resumes. People still pride themselves on, I'm a great multitasker. And I think it's just because people didn't understand what that was doing to the brain. So I think just being, I think trying it for yourself. And it's hard at first because you have to break that habit because you're used to toggling between two things. Even if it's, let me answer this email and then check my phone, and let me answer that, do this, and then social media, and then the back and forth. It's like, if you can just get yourself to a point where for 20 minutes you can deeply focus and build that skill, and then modeling that. I mean, when your coworkers or friends see that you're more productive, they may be more willing to try or engage. But it's a shift that needs to happen, and it just kind of, it's like it starts with each of us.
Emma, do you want to add anything on perspective of multitasking and how to get rid of that in your personal, not personal, but in your off the job life?
I honestly think that Julie hit like the nail on the head, and I would agree too, especially with the first question. I enjoy working a lot, but I think that distinction of multitasking isn't just doing multiple things. It's kind of contrasting goals at one time and point is really, really important to understand and to get across, because I also think that my generation has the best chance to kind of dispel that resume, I'm a multitasker. So I think that working to have conversations about not the dangers of multitasking, but just the ineffectiveness of doing it is going to be really important. And I think that my generation can really work to push forth those conversations, because I think that there is more of a chance to change that narrative prior to getting in the workforce. And prior to kind of getting into that space where you really would be working on different projects and different things, not just being a teen in high school. So I think that's kind of my teen perspective on it. But I completely understand loving working, but kind of taking that love for work and just funneling it into specific projects at specific points that are isolated from one another.
Yeah, I think that's a really great advice. There's a very interesting question from Jan, who says, it's not because there are three ladies in the panel, but I'm asking, what do you think social network state right now is mainly due to the bro or dude culture we see in Silicon Valley?
I don't know, but I do think that, and I'm curious, Emma, if you've done, or you're familiar with the work of Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin with, Center for Humane Technology. But I love a lot of the ways that they call out these big tech companies and really are just calling them higher, I think, in terms of, just the fact that our attention is monetized. So I don't know if that has to do with, being male or female, but I do think it's like, I think the fact that yeah, that our attention is essentially for sale, it's like then it's never going to be necessarily, is that promoting our, best interest.
And I love the work with the Center for Humane Technology. They're incredible. And it's a great resource for anyone out there who wants to kind of learn more about just what's happening in Silicon Valley, and then also the regulation that's occurring and the pushes, because they are really working hard to get more regulation, and to at least just promote the conversations that we needed. In general, I'd say that I agree. I don't really know if it is something that is caused by the fact that a lot of CEOs are male, but I do agree that there is something to say about a distinctly female dilemma, a distinctly female social dilemma on apps. I think that a lot of young girls enter social media and enter kind of Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and gain a weird kind of corrosive body standard. I think that that's promoted on social media apps, and that can be really, really harmful to young females. But again, I don't think that these apps, and I don't think that the social network state right now is because these CEOs and main leaders in the industry are males. But again, in these apps, there are distinct issues that I think females struggle with and kind of have to grapple with. And that's something that Logoff has kind of addressed, and we're working on a female initiative to discuss those, to dispel body standards, and to kind of prioritize conversations about editing, because so much that we see on these apps, it's like the highlight reel and it's also edited down. So that's kind of a conversation that we've had, but I think that's a really good point and an interesting thing to ponder on if it is due to dude culture.
Yeah, I think that one thing that is definitely pointing towards is this need to basically include more diverse voices in the development process and in the also leadership of those kind of applications. And I think that's something that we can all agree on. And for the Center of Humane Technology, I was basically, there was one part that I find really inspiring, which is actually the topic of my social truth, which is also really putting forward a lot of perspectives on the actual use of social media, and I just put that in the chat because I really enjoyed looking through these different experiences and comments there. So the last question that we get the chance to answer to is the question from Lennis, who is asking, Julie, what are your thoughts on the link between meditation and brain health?
Oh, there's so many.
Short version.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of brain health requires your frontal lobe to come online. Your prefrontal cortex is what helps you make decisions, kind of think rationally. And a lot of times that comes back to emotional regulation. So when we're stressed and anxious and upset, that those systems can't come online because we're in our limbic, and amygdala is working. So meditation is a great tool to be able to really calm that, so that then your reasoning can happen. But then also, I mean, we know that there are benefits for improved memory, improved attention, improvements in just emotional well-being. And so there's a ton of really great research that just shows really strong connections with that and having a healthy brain. And so that's a practice that is part of my life. I try to at least, if not 10 minutes, 5, and if not 5, like 3 or 2, but to just sit and breathe and have that be built in as a part of my day. And I mean, just because the research is so conclusive of what that does over time, if you want your brain to be working and healthy, to keep up with your body until later in life. So I definitely recommend that. And there are so many incredible resources for that now. So many apps and just free YouTube meditations and things, podcasts that you can listen to. So highly, highly recommend.
But I think that was a very good overlay into the end of our discussion, and I hope that you are going to stay on with us to join the networking afterwards. But what we wanted to end this on also is a couple of takeaways, to not only leave it with a discussion, but to also give you a few practical resources and things that you can do. And I think that's why we wanted to quickly highlight and also put here in the chat, but we're also going to send that to you as an email afterwards, so you can go through all of those. Have a look at the log of movement, join the conversation, and also look at the challenges and initiatives that you can find there. Listen to the podcast of LogOff, which is also really, really a great resource. Have a look at the Brain Health Project. And consider signing up if you want to be one of those 120,000 people that are actually not only advancing research, but are also in the process learning a lot about their brain and improving their own habits and health. Have a look at Julie's website and at her podcast as well. So I think we have quite a lot of resources from our two speakers here, and I think there's a lot more conversations to be had. And of course, also if you would want to look into our app, into Tiramisu, we're going to post the link there. So if you're not signed up yet, it would be great if you sign up and help us to improve it and to launch it. Yeah, and come join us for the next episodes of Tiramisu Talks. I could really continue this conversation for another hour or so, but I think it's time to close off and go to our tables. So I would just like to have, from both your perspective, because we know our attention is very limited and we made that very clear. If people have listened now for 45 minutes, if they forget everything we said, what's the one thing that they should keep in mind and keep connected to after the session?
You want me to go first? I think really just that you are in control of your own brain, and that you don't have to just kind of accept a lot of cultural norms or just lifestyle things. And so that if you want to have a healthy brain for your whole life, that there are things that you can do today. And so I think just to encourage people with that.
And to build off of that, just starting conversations is so imperative to changing that social narrative. And I think that conversations and words and storytelling really pushes forth a more humane narrative of time spent on social media. So I think, help spread digital consciousness. Every conversation matters. And then don't forget to find your community or a buddy if you do want to work on building better screen time habits. It really helps.
I think starting conversations is the perfect layover to the next part of the session. I really hope that you're going to stay with us. And basically, so what's going to happen is this session is going to end, and there are a few tables appearing. So if you're still in the audience, take a seat at one of those tables, and you will be connected to one of us, two audience members, and we can have a little bit of a conversation in the end of the session as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope that you continue the conversation and start other conversations like Emma just suggested. Thank you so much for being here, Emma and Julie. It was a really great conversation.
Thanks for having us.